virtual tasting based on the WSET systematic approach to tasting that we teach with here at the Italian Wine Academy in Verona for all of our courses. We will be basing our tasting today on the level 2 and the level 3 approach. This is to give all of you as broad a view of the wine as possible. The idea being to connect the theory of the wine with what you taste in the glass. So thinking about the natural and human factors that go into making the wine taste the way it does. And for those of you who have not been to the website and booked yourself onto their next course, please be aware they are fully updated. So please go online, book your next course. If you've taken the level 2, take the level 3 with me. It's going to be fantastic. And you've already got your tasting practice. So as usual, I will give you a little bit of a background into the wine before we start our tasting. So today we're tasting the 2017 the Raimonda Barbera d'Alba DOC from Fontanafredda. This is 100% Barbera, although the DOC does allow some blending of Nebbiolo. It's very rare to find that, because why would you put your Nebbiolo in with your Barbera when you can show off your Barbera as 100%? It's had 12 months in barrel, which I'll get to in a moment because it's quite interesting. The sites that Fontanafredda are growing their Barbera d'Alba on are calcareous marl soils, okay, so high limestone content. So we really should see an impact of this on the wines. Yeah. They're also south to southeast facing slopes, so it's getting a lot of sunshine. So we should see quite a lot of potential ripeness in these grapes. Maybe that will impact the body, maybe it will impact on the alcohol levels. So we are going to be taking these two things into account when we taste, because I really think it's impactful on the wine. So they vinify in steel. So the wine making, the fermentation takes place in stainless steel, and it only spends 7 to 8 days, the wine, in contact with the skins. Okay. So this is pretty interesting because Barbera is a grape variety, does have quite a lot of concentrated color in the grape. It has potential for quite deep wines. So this short maceration time, again, is something we'll be looking for in the wine. Can we see that play out in the wine in the glass? So I talked about 12 months in oak barrel. Fontanafredda are quite interesting with their Barbera because they split the wine after it's been fermented into 2 different types of barrel. So a roughly 50% is going into very large casks. So very, very large French and Slavonian oak, okay? So a more neutral form of oak. For those of you thinking about your ratios, you've got much more liquid to oak contact, so less contact. So for this, we would be looking for a little bit of oxidation, maybe a little bit of change of color in the wine, and just a gentle spice. Okay. The other part of the wine is put into small barriques. So these are 225 litre barriques of new French and American oak. Okay. So here you've got much more contact between the wine and the oak, and much stronger oak style. Okay. It's particularly interesting that they're also using a medium toast. So they are obviously wanting to get some of this smoky, toasty character, as well as the kind of rich coffee, more coconut spice that you're going to get from that American oak. So quite a lot of things at play already potentially in this wine. In terms of the grape variety itself, Barbera is highly colored, high in acid, but tends to have slightly softer tannins than some of the other grape varieties you'd expect in Piemonte. So we would be expecting to have lower tannins than something like Nebbiolo, for example. So what are we expecting in the glass from that? So acidity, Color, potentially, although we do have this interplay of the natural factor of a highly colored grape with the human factor of a short maceration time. Okay, maybe not quite so high tannins, but there's a lot of oak, so maybe some tannins from oak. Barbera should be giving us red fruit characteristics classically. And then we're thinking about this interplay of the soils and the site, the aspect, the slope. So calcareous marl soils, potentially retaining acidity in the wine, maybe with the alcohol being a little bit higher because you have this potential for more ripeness in the grapes from these sun-baked south-southeast slopes. And then finally, we're trying to look at what we can discern from the oak character of the wine, knowing all of this information about the different types of oak at use. So let's have a bit of a taste. Like I say, we'll go through both the SATs because it is quite an interesting one for that. So I'm going to take a look at the color first. I don't know if I've said in my previous tasting, I think I did, that when I'm testing for color in reds, I tend to look straight down the glass because I think this is a really good indication because you are looking for whether you can see the base or just the stem or nothing at all in terms of your color intensity. So when I look through this, I can just about still see where the stem of the glass meets the bowl. And so that means it's actually only a medium intensity wine. Okay? And that's on both SATs. It's medium intensity because you can still see through it a little bit. So this is where we can really see that combination of you'd expect it to be darker, but the lesser maceration has really had an impact. Not huge color extraction. Okay? And in terms of color, this is really, really tricky. And if you were being assessed for your level 3 and I was your examiner, I would allow both ruby and purple in this wine because there is a distinct hint towards blue. Okay? For me, I see it as ruby, but I can tell that there is a little bit of blue in this wine. For those who are more sensitive to blue in the color spectrum, I would be quite happy to also award purple. I would expect purple from the wine, but having had that oak contact, I think it's lost a little bit of the purple hue that you would classically expect. Okay? So I would accept both ruby and purple for this wine. For me, it's ruby. But it's so on that borderline that as an examiner, you would not expect a student to be able to, certainly for level 3, to pick it. Okay, so I'm going to have a smell. Yeah, so I talk quite a lot about how far into the glass you need to put your nose. For me, I'm just hovering just above the lip of the glass. So for me, this is medium for your level 2, okay? And remember, on level 3, you've got that little bit more scope, so it's just pushing into the medium plus, because there is a gap between my nose and the glass, but it's not a big one, yeah? I'm having to search a little bit. So medium for your SAT level 2, just pushing into medium plus. And what am I smelling? So I was expecting to get red fruit, and there's loads of it. So I get very clearly bright red cherry. I get ripe strawberry, red plum. I also get a little bit of blueberry in this wine. So that's my kind of fruit spectrum. And it's all in that primary character. Yeah, it's all fresh or ripe. There's nothing dried about it. There's a tiny, tiny little bit of red, slightly unripe fig. There's a slight green note to this wine, whether that's coming across as something like an unripe fig, when you get the green pith, the skin of the fig. Also maybe a green herb, a little bit of bay leaf for me. So they're my primary characters. I do also get very clear secondary characters. Remember, these are ones that come from the winemaking itself. So there is a lot of smoke and toast on this wine. I also get spices, But the spices for me are quite savory spices. So I'm looking at things like nutmeg and allspice, a little bit of juniper, not so much with the cinnamon. I don't get cinnamon or clove. It's not that strong. It's a much brighter spice, as I would call it. Yeah, really nice. The toasty notes are really quite well integrated in this wine. Yeah, and yeah, that little bit of blueberry on the backbone, I think really adds to the complexity of this wine. Yeah. So all primary and secondary characteristics, so all of those coming from the grape or coming from the winemaking, nothing in that tertiary category. Okay, it's not even starting to present itself with any of that dried fruit. And this, for those of you studying for your level 3, is an indication that it is still a youthful wine. Yeah, primary and secondary characters still youthful. If it was developing, if it was beginning to develop, you would have at least something in that tertiary category. So let's give it a taste. As usual, I'm going to taste for sweetness and acid first, because I find that by breaking the SAT down into these manageable chunks, you can really focus on the thing at hand. Okay, so it's dry, which is as you'd expect, and it's really high acid. Yeah, my mouth is watering intensely with this wine. And that's not only coming from the fact that you've got a high acid grape, but remember you're managing to maintain it with the help of the limestone soils. So dry, high acid. I can already, without even starting to look for it, get an idea about body and tannin from that first taste. But I'm going to go back, taste again, just to confirm what I suspected with my first taste. And remember, if you're struggling with the body on a wine like this, okay, with such high acidity, but with potentially some high alcohol, hold it in your mouth, okay, without running air through it. Just hold it in your mouth, and that should neutralize some of the other things going on to give you a clearer idea of the body. So yeah, the body on this wine is only medium, okay, which is around what I would expect anyway, particularly with the high acid. But if you hold it in your mouth, I think people think of Barbera as wanting to be quite a full-bodied wine, but this is not. It's just in that medium category. I would put it in medium for both level 2 and level 3, okay? Because when I hold it in my mouth, it doesn't feel like cream. Yeah, there is a lightness to it, okay? In terms of tannin, it's quite prevalent. It's a medium plus on your level 3 scale and a medium if you're using the level 2 scale. And that's because although you would expect only moderate tannins from the grape, you've got quite a lot of oak tannin at play. Okay, so that's helping boost those tannins a little bit. And actually the acidity nicely balances the tannin in the mouth. Okay. So I'm going to taste again just to see if I can find anything different on the palate to what I found on the nose. Remember, you should always write a clear note for what are your aromas and what are your flavors, even if they match with each other. And whilst I'm doing that, I'm going to have a think about the finish. Yeah. So a little bit less intensity on the palate than there was on the nose. Okay, so it's medium in that bracket for both SAT 2 and 3, but still quite a lot of that complexity. Okay, and one of the things I really get on the palate is this kind of coming together of the bright cherry character and this kind of the characters from the oak. So and also a little bit from the malolactic fermentation. Now, normally you don't notice that so much in reds. All red wines go through malo, but it has got this slightly coffee and chocolatey character. And there's a particular character I associate with malolactic fermentation, this kind of dairy chocolate. There's a particular chocolate from the United Kingdom that tastes a little bit like this wine, which gives me this indication that it's gone through malo. And again, it's just picking up on that slight chocolate roasted coffee note in addition that I would add to my tasting note. Okay, so you've still got the bright cherry and the blueberry, the little sort of herby note, that kind of bay leaf, that clove. So it's as I would expect, just with that little bit of added extra from this roasted coffee character. And for me, the finish fades away relatively quickly. It's in the medium bracket for me. The thing that I'm left with is the alcohol, which we didn't talk about. And that's because it's high alcohol, okay? So thank you for catching me on the alcohol note. It is warming at the back of my throat, and I think the acidity also kind of helps you not notice that so much until you linger on the finish. Okay. So in terms of thinking about the quality and the aging of this wine, it is balanced because you've got the tannin, but you've got this lovely acidity to back it up. You've got some nice complexity. So you're thinking about, like, it's not just that it's got primary and secondary characteristics, but it's got quite a few things in those brackets. Remember, I listed cherries and plums and fig and strawberry. I'm listing smoke and toast and coffee. So it's got some complexity. Where it falls down a little bit for me is the intensity, okay? So it's only in that medium cluster of intensity, and it's only in the medium cluster for finish. So using our kind of Blick approach, this would put this in the good bracket for a wine. Balance, some good complexity, but lacking a little bit in the intensity and in the length. Okay? But I do think it shows a little bit of potential, because if you think about the fact that it could age, so I am saying that this is drink now, but has potential for aging. Remember, it's got those high tannins, it's got that high acidity, it's got lots of bright red fruit character. I think you would begin to see this intensifying of the fruit, this move from the fruit from fresh to dried, which would just give it that little bit more intensity in a couple of years. So that is the Barbera, the Raimonda. I'm just going to check and see if you guys have questions, if there are any more that you haven't put in there. Yes, medium finish, even for WSET level 3. It doesn't push into that medium plus bracket for me. Thank you, Jacopo, for answering about the alcohol. I'm sorry I missed it. I was so focused on the body. I hope that is clear for everyone. And like I say, this idea of like thinking about the way that this is suspected potentially to be a deeply colored wine, but this shorter maceration stops it from being truly deep. It's in that medium bracket. Remember, we've got this maintenance of acidity. And you can really see when I was talking about southeast facing slopes, that is present in how we get the alcohol level. Okay. I'm saying the quality level is good. I've just seen the question in the chat. Because when we're looking at the Blick scale that we use for WSET, we're looking at balance, length, intensity, and complexity. And you want a tick in every single one of those for an outstanding wine, okay? And then gradually, as you take those things away, you go down the scale, okay? And for me, the 2 ticks that this wine really gets are its balance and its level of complexity, okay? But it's really in that medium bracket for intensity. It's got less intensity on the palate than it has on the nose. And it just doesn't have that long finish. It's a little bit dominated still by the acid and alcohol on the finish. Remember, finish is about the positive characteristics of the wine, the flavors of the wine, not the structural elements like the alcohol or the sugar or the acid. Okay, so for me, without those two things, can only be in the good bracket, but it's still a good quality Barbera, and it shows off the grape very well, I think, with these classic red characteristics and this high acidity. Okay, thank you very much, as always, to the team and to all of you guys for joining me for the Italian Wine Academy virtual tasting. Like I said, we'll be doing this again next week. If you have any other questions, please feel free to get in touch with us. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your evening, and thank you very much. Ciao.